A Comma in the Middle of a Phrase by Slumber. Read by Peony Podfix. It's a crisp fall afternoon, a few Sundays into the second term of their second year, when Hunter runs into Todoroki at the museum. It's a literal run-in. Hunter had been trying to take a closer look at one particular painting from the special exhibit, mindful of his knobbly elbows and gangly arms, stepping back respectfully when one of the museum goers glances his way. When his heel lands on something soft and definitely not floor. He winces and turns around to apologize. And it turns out it's Todoroki's foot he stepped on. Crap. Sorry about that. Hunter apologizes, moving quicker now to fully step out of the way. It's the last Sunday of the exhibit, and moon above Daimotsu Bay is the highlight. He should have probably known better than to come today. Todoroki looks at him curiously. Did you not want to see the painting? Yeah, but it's alright. Too many people right now. He grins, scratching his head. Didn't expect to see you here. That's not entirely true either. Todoroki showing up at a special exhibit at a museum dedicated to ukiyo-e is actually very likely, when Hunter really thinks about it. Todoroki's room has a tatami mat, for God's sake. Out of all of his classmates, he's absolutely the type to show up at a place like this. But somehow in the last year or so, Hunter's separated UA from the mundane, so maybe that's why. I wanted to see the exhibit, Todoroki says. And I like museums. They're peaceful. Hunter grins. Just last week, Todoroki had landed in the hospital after a skirmish at his internship. 2 weeks ago, there had been an attack right by the school. The museum being peaceful is a little of an understatement. I know what you mean, he says. Want to look at the other paintings first? Maybe wait until closer to closing so we can see this one last? Todoroki blinks up at him, a flash of what's probably curiosity in his eyes, before he nods, following Hunter over to the less crowded areas of the exhibit. Hunter usually prefers to just appreciate the art for what it is, his interest less on the history or backdrop and just a vague, hazy sort of nostalgia for the traditional. But Todoroki's keen and smart, has stories to tell about some of the pieces they view that draw Hunter in a little more. He learns more about the artist from listening to Todoroki's explanations than reading the dry little descriptions beside each work. And though Todoroki's tone is steady and even, there's a glimmer in his gaze, a faraway look in his eyes that Hunter isn't used to seeing on him. You're really into this stuff, aren't you? He asks at one point, unable to guise the awe in his voice. When Todoroki pauses, looking a little uncertain, Hunter is quick to add, It's great. I like knowing about it, that's all. I was required to learn it, Todoroki says. My father was very strict about my education, but my teacher made it interesting. Hunter blinks. You had to learn it? Yes. My father had specific ideas about my upbringing. I didn't agree with all of his methods, so I suppose it was a small act of rebellion to enjoy what I was learning about. To know it not so I can use it to get better grades, but just for its own sake. I think it worked out well for you, Hunter says after a short moment. He grins when Todoroki cocks his head at him. I mean, you found something you enjoy, and you got to do that even despite his intentions, right? And now I'm learning about it too, so it's a win-win. It's not boring. Hunter shrugs. Not to me. He laughs, scratching the back of his neck sheepishly. But I guess there's a gap in coolness between me and the rest of you guys, huh? So, I don't know if my opinion really counts. It counts to me, Todoroki says. If you don't think it's boring, then it's not boring. Okay. Well, and if you like it, then you should enjoy it. Deal? Deal. Hunter's not sure if he imagines it or not, but it looks like Todoroki almost smiles at when he says that. Just a small tug at the corner of his lips, a softening in his gaze. Todoroki really is the prettiest boy in class. Up close like this, Kaminari's constant prattling on attractiveness, a strong influence in the back of his head, it's hard not to see. More than just the altogether aesthetically pleasing features, even including the scar, which is its own strange sort of beauty mark, there's kind of an unearthliness to his quiet solemnity and restraint in the stillness of a teenage boy that's otherworldly. Like one of the paintings that'd be on display. The one with the fox in front of the moon. An elegant silhouette clear against a dark shroud of fog and mist. He's not like most of their classmates, and in a class full of already extraordinary people, Hunter feels almost irrelevant in that moment. Not with the crippling, crushing weight of self-doubt and insecurity, but the kind of even-keeled assessment of facts as they stood. Hunter is going to be a hero, sure, even an above-average one, but Todoroki is someone destined for one of those long heroic arcs, the kind you read about in manga. It's that kind of bearing, that kind of gravitas. Not everyone's got that. Is something wrong? Todoroki asks, and Hunter flushes with the realization he'd been spending the last minute contemplating Todoroki's face. Your eyes just... It's really blue. Hunter sputters out, looking away as he combs his hand through his hair. It's pretty cool. Hey, I think there's fewer people by that centerpiece now. Do you want to head over and see it? All right, Todoroki says, and he doesn't push further. Ask more about why Hunter was so busy staring at his blue eyes or something. He probably gets it often, honestly. It occurs to Hunter later that maybe Todoroki had intended to spend the afternoon on his own, as Hunter had. But by the time they get back to their dorms early that evening, he thinks maybe Todoroki didn't mind. Hunter doesn't really think much of that museum run-in again. But Todoroki asks him if he's ever been to the open-air museum. So the next free weekend they have, they take the train to Konegi Park and walk into a demonstration on Edo-era bamboo screen making and printing. It's a solid hour and a half, so it's nearly lunch by the time it's done. But Hunter doesn't mind, and Todoroki looks like he's paying equal attention to it as well. When Hunter's gaze flickers over to check. "That was pretty interesting," he says later, wandering down the museum's park and taking a look at the different buildings they could go into. It's still a little chilly. Some are long gone, but there are enough benches to spare. Only a few other visitors strolling around. He picks a free bench and takes a seat, leaving enough room for Todoroki to be comfortable. He takes out the onigiri they've picked up from the konbini on the way over, plus a bottle of water to keep himself hydrated, watching Todoroki do the same. "Did you like it?" "I was hoping they'd talk more about the paintings," Todoroki admits. He takes a bite off his onigiri and chews thoughtfully, and for a moment, Hunter's a little struck by the absurdity of how normal their conversation is. He almost forgets Todoroki can freeze an entire stadium over. Has, in fact, done so to him at one point, when he's sitting a foot away, taking neat little bites of food. It's nice, though, having this level of normal. Before they'd moved to the dorms, Hunter had at least a whole evening with his salaryman father, his stay-at-home mother, his bratty little sisters. Since then, it seemed to him there'd been no respite from the chaos of training for pro-hero work, and though Hunter loves every minute of it, he can't really go at full speed all hours of the day, all days of the week. "Yeah, I'm more into the prints too," he agrees. "I think they said next month they'll be doing the inkwash paintings. Do you want to go then?" His onigiri is gone in 2 bites. He picks up another one and tears into it too. "I'd like that." They do go to the demonstration for the inkwash paintings, which is actually a little better than before. The speaker sets up a few seats in the room, some supplies laid out before them, and Todoroki and Hunter are lucky enough to be some of the first arrivals. They grab seats next to each other, and at the end of the presentation, they're walked through the steps of creating a typical painting of the time. Hunter glances over at Todoroki at one point, sees him moving his hand so very, very carefully across the canvas, a contrast to the fuck it YOLO principle that's ruling Hunter's own rash, sweeping strokes. As though sensing his gaze on him, Todoroki looks up then, his eyes twitching oddly at Hunter, until he realizes that's because his tongue is sticking out the side of his face, as it normally does when he's concentrating on a particularly difficult problem or intricately involved task. Hunter beams, nodding at Todoroki's canvas. "How's that going?" he asks. "Poorly." Hunter laughs. Todoroki's not mincing words. His efforts are commendable, but in his heavy concentration, the brushstrokes are evenly thick throughout the lining, losing the depth and texture characteristic of the paintings. "I'll still put it on my wall," he says. "Probably. I thought you did calligraphy." "I know how to write those characters," Todoroki tells him. "I don't know how to write mountains." He peers over at Hunter's own work. "You're better at this than I am." That's not saying much," Hunter says with a snicker. I'll trade you after, if you like. There's a twitch of confusion on Todoroki's face. Something that looks like mirth flashing in his eyes. Well, he says, it's your wall. It becomes a Sunday thing, the museum trips, but they begin to talk more, even outside of those days. Talking to Todoroki at UA feels like a breath of fresh air. They bring up exhibits they're interested in, or museums they want to go to when they get a chance to have lunch together. Picking a nice quiet place on campus where they can eat quietly. Hunter picks up a thing of origami paper on impulse once, and asks Todoroki over to his room, where they try to fold as many paper cranes as they can, before calling it a night. One afternoon, Todoroki heats up a pot of special tea he'd ordered with his father's account, and they sit in the kitchen, making plans for their next trip. They still have their Sunday thing, but now they also have their Todoroki and Sero things. The exhibit on textiles has been on Hunter's calendar since he first heard it was happening, and when he flips his calendar to December and sees a reminder for it there, his first instinct is to head over to Todoroki's room next door. Sorry, did I disturb you? He asks, eyeing the book Todoroki holds in his hand. He blinks slowly, his lips moving like he's fighting back a yawn. Just going over some homework. What is it? There's a textiles thing next week. This Sunday, he adds, because Todoroki visits his mother on Saturdays. They're gonna have, like, old looms and dyes and things. Don't know if that's your thing. I was gonna go alone, but if you're free... Yeah, that sounds interesting. I'll go with you. Great, thanks, Hunter says, grinning. Hey, is that English you're working on? Yes. Did you understand the reading? Yes. Was there anything about it you had questions about? Probably everything. I can go over it if you'd like. Todoroki opens his door wider, stepping back to let Hunter through. His gaze catches on his attempt at a painting. Relatively better than Todoroki's, maybe, but ridiculously out of place among the pristine and tastefully but expensively decorated room, hanging beside the wardrobe. He fights the urge to ask Todoroki to take it down, following him over to the kotatsu he'd set up in the center. Do you even need this? He asks, grinning. I like the blanket, Todoroki says simply. And yeah, he does look pretty cozy. His large fuzzy turtleneck sweater tucked snugly by his chin, the hems on his sleeves hanging low, covering up to the second knuckle on his fingers. Hunter tries to fold himself small enough beneath the table, but since they're sharing a textbook, he can't sit across from Todoroki, so he ends up knocking his calf a few times until he's comfortable. Sorry, he mutters. Don't worry about it. Todoroki opens the textbook, flipping to the passage they were supposed to read. Leaning closer, so that the two of them could go through it together. What questions did you have trouble with? The textile exhibit is on loan from Kyoto. Only a month-long engagement, so Hunter's determined to make the most of it. Though he usually likes sleeping in on weekends, and knows Todoroki enjoys his late mornings as well, they head over there bright and early, before the young families and the elderly start showing up. My grandfather had a loom set up like this in the house, Hunter says, his fingers itching to skim the beautiful old wood, carved with intricate designs and set atop a small elevation, spotlit and protected by an unintrusive rope barrier. He found this carpenter who specialized in that kind of stuff, you know. Paid him to recreate them. But there's something about the quality of the woods. He says it's not really the same. Your grandfather wove. Yeah, I got my quirk from him, but his elbows shot out silk. It kind of felt natural to go into weaving after that, but he worked with other fabrics too. He really liked using Rami. Said he liked how his dyes looked on them. Your room? Yeah, he made most of them. Hunter grins. Do you know how? A little bit. I'm not super consistent, but he showed me the basics. Dyeing things was always pretty fun. Messy, too. Sorry, I'm talking your ear off, aren't I? Todoroki shakes his head. You really like this, don't you? I like hearing about it. He points to the next loom on display. Is that much different from this one? Yeah, no, only a little bit. Hunter takes a closer look, Todoroki beside him, his arm brushing lightly against Hunter's. I think this one's supposed to produce coarser fabrics. Oh, they have samples over there. Come on. He doesn't think twice about tugging Todoroki over, bony fingers closing around Todoroki's slender wrist. He doesn't think twice about it because Todoroki lets himself get dragged away. And when Todoroki pulls his wrist back, lets his fingers close around Hunter's own, it just feels like the most natural thing in the world. Have you heard of Seishu Handa? Todoroki asks. They're getting ready for a game of quirk tag, but the class has been divided into two groups and they're waiting for their turn while the first group plays. He's that young calligraphy artist, right? Hunter's in the middle of his stretches when he tilts his head to the side, turning to look at Todoroki. I haven't heard that name in a while, though. He was on some kind of sabbatical. But he has a solo exhibition coming up soon. There's a shout from the game. Both of them turn to see what Bakugo and Midori are doing, because of course, the two of them are at it again. But Todoroki resumes talking with hardly a change in tone or demeanor. It's an art gallery in Bunkyo, if you wanted to see it too. My family received invitations. Really? Yeah, sure, Hunter says with a grin. Sounds like fun. Todoroki nods solemnly at that. It's a date then. Okay, Hunter says, waving him away when Ida comes over to start strategizing with him. His mind catches up seconds later. Wait, a what now? Beside him, Kaminari whistles. Bro, you have the prettiest boyfriend. Ugh, tell me your secrets. I have a what? Run this by me again, Kaminari says, a crease between his brows, thumb and forefingers massaging his temples, one hand on his hip. It's later that afternoon. Classes are done for the day, and dinner is in an hour. They're in Kaminari's room. He insisted. You and Todoroki haven't been dating? I don't know. So, that's a no, he says with a wince. 'Cause I'm pretty sure both parties knowing is kind of a requirement. I mean, call me crazy, but that's just my wild guess. He runs his palm down his face, and when he pops both eyes open, he pins Hunter with a sharp look. Haven't you two been hanging out a lot lately? Yeah, but that's... You're always doing something on Sundays. We like the same things, so we've been... And you have lunch with him a lot. Sometimes. It's a lot. And twice last week I went to look for you, and you weren't in your room. And I heard you two talking in his. We didn't do anything. Kaminari narrows his gaze, leaning closer, as though he can glean from a look the truth in Hunter's words. Hunter, for his part, keeps his eyes on him, projecting as much surprise and panic as he can. It seems to satisfy Kaminari, who moves to cross his arms and flop down on his seat. That's a shame, he says with a sigh. Todoroki really likes you. A shame? I mean, because you're gonna have to let him down, Kaminari clarifies, a half shrug. A little awkward, sure, but the right thing to do, right? I think he'd understand. I mean, you could talk to Midoriya and see what he thinks, since he knows Todoroki a little bit more. Wait. Kaminari looks up at him. You said you didn't see him that way. I didn't say... So, wait. Do you? Hunter's brain settles to a stop. He can't ask whether it matters, because apparently Todoroki seems to think so. But he hasn't even entertained the idea. Didn't let himself so much as... I don't understand. Do you want to date him? Kaminari asks, impatient until Hunter lets out a hopeless whine, and then he rolls his chair closer. When he speaks this time, his tone is kinder. And when I say date, I mean spending time with another person you like, and want to get to know better while you do fun things together. I know what a date is, he says weakly. Why would he... He lets himself drift off, but the question hangs in the air. He's an extra, plain and not really all that cool. Serviceable, but ultimately forgettable. He hadn't questioned hanging out with Todoroki because he's used to occupying a nice, comfortable, friend-shaped spot in everyone else's life. It doesn't add up. Doesn't make sense in his head, and it must show. because Kaminari's looking at him with a growing sense of alarm. "Are you kidding me, bro?" he asks. "Why wouldn't Todoroki..." "Dude, why wouldn't he? You're super cool. You're really handsome, you're strong, you're the most emotionally stable person I know. Seriously, if we hadn't become bros first and I'd already spelled your farts, I would totally crush on you. Like, a lot. Also, you're tall, and I like that. Maybe it's a taste thing, but maybe Todoroki is the same thing? Anyway, don't give me that look. I'm not just saying this too. And if you don't believe me, well, does there really need to be a reason?" Hunter shrugs. But he thinks it would be nice to know if there is a reason, so he can keep being those things. "I guess." "Dude," Kaminari says. "He likes you and you like him. And he's already asked you to a date and you've already accepted." "Yeah." "So, like, maybe you don't believe he does yet, but is there actually a problem? Do you want to not go anymore? Stop going out with him?" Hunter knows Kaminari knows the answer. And Kaminari's got a point. It settles the flurry in his head. But now it's his chest that feels a weird sort of jumpiness and unease. He takes a deep breath and makes a decision. "I think I'm gonna need something to wear to this thing." It's a fancy exhibit at a fancy gallery with fancy people. Hunter assumed something like it when Todoroki says they received invitations. But then Todoroki gives him the ticket at lunch, and among the details listed, the attire had been specified. "I'm too young to need a suit," he mutters to Kaminari that afternoon. And at Kaminari's raised eyebrow, he shows him the ticket. "It says formal wear. I didn't know they did that kind of thing for these." "Your boyfriend's a fancy man," Kaminari tells him. "And face it, you guys are into fancy shit." "Where am I gonna get a suit, though?" Hunter asks. Kaminari grins. "I have an idea." The idea has a name, and her name is Yaoyorozu Momo. She shows up one evening on the 5th floor, knocking on Hunter's door and asking if he has some time to get his measurements done. "Oh, and I want to get Todoroki's too." "What? Why?" Hunter follows her next door, sharing a look of confusion with Todoroki. But he lets them both in. And really, when Yaoyorozu is in a helping mood, she gets really hard to refuse. So they stand up straight when she asks, holding up a tape measure from their shoulder to their feet. They hold out their hands on either side of them, letting her take down the distance between each shoulder and wrist, and then the area around their chest, their waist, their hips, the distance from shoulder to waist, hip to heel. She writes down these measurements in neat little handwriting. And Hunter doesn't realize how many parts of his body there are to keep track of. "Isn't this against the rules?" Todoroki asks at one point. Though there's no accusation in his voice, just a careful kind of curiosity. "Todoroki, are you suggesting I'm about to use my quirk for personal reasons?" Her eyes kind of sparkle wetly with unshed tears. Hand to her mouth. "I know a tailor, that's all. They're very skilled. Besides, it sounds like it could be a fun date. I want you two to enjoy yourselves. Hunter feels the heat creeping into his cheeks. His gaze steadfastly on the floor as Yaoyorozu moves from Todoroki to Hunter to take the last couple of measurements. He chances a quick glance at Todoroki, finds him staring straight at him, so he smiles weakly in return, then shifts his gaze back to the floor. Whoever you're spending time with these days, he tells Yaoyorozu. Jiro, most likely. They may be rubbing off on you too well. When does the exhibit open again? She asks, her smile angelic. When Todoroki tells her, she nods. These will be ready before then. And just as quickly as she shows up, she's gone. A mini tornado of helpful enthusiasm that leaves Hunter awkwardly scratching the back of his neck. Sorry about that, he says. I told Kaminari, and I guess... Your face got red, Todoroki points out. When she said she wants us to enjoy ourselves. Is that... Are you okay? I am, Hunter says, flushing anew. I'm just, getting used to the idea, I guess. What idea? Crap. Of dating you? But I hadn't realized. Not that I didn't want to, I didn't realize. Oh, Todoroki says, his cheeks red. I'm sorry. Hey, no. Like I said, I don't mind, Hunter tells him, grinning. I really don't mind. Kaminari comes to deliver the suits with Yaoyorozu the afternoon of the exhibit opening. Their smiles are too pleased, the pep in their steps just this side of perky. And Hunter figures out why, when he opens the box and instead of a suit, he finds the fabric of a beautiful, dark charcoal, subtly textured with intricate patterns. A haori, folded carefully atop a matching hakama. Beneath both lay a simple black kimono. You can't wear this, he tells Todoroki, noting the unconcerned look he wore. Can we? These are formal clothes, though, Todoroki says, fingering the material of his obi with something like reverence. It's his haori and hakama that are black, his kimono in charcoal. These are matching kimonos. She's outdone herself this time. Yeah, she has. I can help you with the obi once you're done putting your kimono on, Todoroki offers shyly. I've never really done them. My sister always... Yeah, of course I'll help. Hunter sees now what Kaminari and Yaoyorozu are trying to do. It's not like they're the subtlest of people, but watching the smile bloom on Todoroki's face, he can't find it in himself to be anything but grateful. It's a chilly winter evening, a few Sundays before the end of the year, when Hunter finally, actually, goes on a date with Todoroki.